What's up, guys? This is Stephen Khuong along with Natalise and Jess. Unlikely journey. Let's get this thing started. This morning, we're going to talk about catastrophes and how to overcome them. And speaking of that, Jess, you have just had a catastrophe this morning. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we all dread the day that our computer dies, right? It has our calendars, our files, our software stuff, all the things we forgot to drag onto maybe sub drives or back up. Yeah, so I had a studio meltdown. I have a recording studio, and I have a studio computer that just decided it was fritzing out. And I have some backup fail safes, but some of them, they have to mail me a drive back. They take a little longer to get to me, and I have a project due on Monday. So I was frantically able to drag a few things over to an external drive before I ran a diagnostic, and then the hard drive just essentially melted in front of my face. So yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because it's there's this Rousseauian essay that's one of my favorite that I read in college that had to do with this idea of the development of technology and how it's supposed to free us up to be able to do other things, but how what it really does is create this incessant reliance upon it. So I don't know how you guys deal with this. How do you I guess this is more of a data management issue. I know for me, I have a few fail safes in place, but the day doesn't stop because the computer dies, right? The hard drive dies. I still have clients that want to know where their projects are. How do you guys and your companies handle that? I mean, we can circle back to kind of my neurotic way of backing everything up, but you guys have data too that is integral to the way your company operates. How do you guys handle something like that, like a meltdown of a computer or drives?
At our company, we're running redundancy all the time. So at any given second, there's a backup. Uh, so we can always recover. That being said, I think this whole topic is leading me to something a little bit deeper. It's about what truly will happen, let's say, if you can't recover. And that has actually
Mm.
happened to me before. And ultimately, the only thing that really saved me was a life hack, which is sitting down and just telling yourself that, you know what, you still have a house to live in, you still have food to eat. A meteorite didn't hit the earth and there wasn't an extinction level event. So having detachment as the ultimate philosophical backup has actually helped me through that time. I mean, it was pretty
Wait,
traumatic.
but back up, what did you lose? Tell us the depth of this loss, so it's understandable about
Yeah.
what did you lose?
So I was a fanatic about taking pictures and videos and archiving all of that stuff at my previous business at the Ice Chamber Gym. And there was about, I want to say, half a terabyte of rich media that was gone forever. And at that moment in time, dude,
Mm.
I was in a state of shock. I was like, I can't believe 5 years of memories, potentially some amazing PR stuff, that we can use, just done, destroyed. And mind you, all of this stuff was backed up. What happened was that when the power went out, there was actually a power surge, and not only did it kill the computer, but it destroyed the backup drives. And this is before cloud backup was fast enough, right? Because I'm talking about Jess and Natalise, we're talking about videos and music. I mean, it's not that easy to back it up on the cloud 10 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And I didn't know at the time that this was gone. So I spent so much time looking up recovery services. Ultimately, I found a place in Nevada that was able to do it. So I drove 2 hours there. They took it. They were like, okay, it's going to cost you $2,000. And by the way, we're able to recover 10% of this. And do you want it? So I
Wow.
paid $2,000 to recover 10% of all the stuff that I lost. And it was, dude, it was like a heartbreak. It was I was so attached to all of these memories and these moments. But it took me a little bit of a while to get over it. But I'll tell you one thing. Since then, I've been super cognizant about telling myself that I can just lose stuff, like data, memory, whatever, and I'll still be okay.
Hmm.
So that's a little bit of my life hack. It's just having that agreement with yourself that yes, it's catastrophic in the sense contextually, but in the greater scheme of things, nothing really happened.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, right? Because what you just described is it's data not just for I assume you used it for marketing purposes as well. But it has, there's some emotional tie to it as well, right? So it's a little bit harder to detach from that. But I think the fact that you've had this philosophy is probably a saving grace.
And I'll tell you, it is not an easy philosophy to practice. It really isn't. Especially for someone like myself, I just love digging through the crates, right? I mean, knowing that there's going to be a part of your memory that's going to be erased permanently. Because I mean, I'm talking about like we used to take pictures, like hundreds of pictures per day, different classes, clients doing some amazing things. And all of a sudden, like, and here's the other thing too, like, it was no fault of anyone's, right? Like, no one could have predicted a power surge.
Mm.
All of the stuff was hooked up in the right place. We had a power surge management protector, and it blew through all of that stuff.
There's like I don't know if you guys have heard this, but I have a friend in like tech management who's like, if it doesn't exist in three places, it doesn't exist at all.
Oh, that's a good rule. I mean,
Like
I better check that out in I'm thinking through like all the data that we're compiling at Parallel. By the end of the summer, we'll have over 20 terabytes of data. I'm like, I'm trying to
yeah,
think.
Oh wow,
it's
I'm
a
trying to
no,
think
you
about
know
like,
it,
oh
that's not
shit,
true. That's
we
I
not
need
it's
to
trivial.
back up.
what
Yeah.
I would say like the blessing of having like like a studio for years is like, and a curse is like your clients kind of they own these sessions, right? So at some point if they come and they want to re-up on something that you did 2 or 3 years ago, like you're hoping your like plugins load, you're hoping your like you don't know what like version of a computer you're on, like and there's other hacks around like making sure like you've like bounced out your sessions in certain ways that like even if things don't load you have like audio versions of it. I'm not always great about that, but I will say like my own studio right now, I do have three backups. So I have my computer, and then I have a hard drive that I drag everything onto. Then I have another hard drive sitting on top of it that I back it up to. And then I have a cloud based service that runs 24 hours a day that in real time syncs everything. So if a meteor hits my apartment, I can still find my client files. And that gives me like an element of being able to like sleep well at night. That doesn't necessarily like save your applications and your programs, which is the stuff that's like, a little bit annoying to have to reinstall. But I would say like, cloud-based stuff and cloud-based backups. Like if everything hit my apartment, like a meteor hit my apartment tomorrow, they could mail me a drive within like a week and it would have like everything from basically all my computers and all my drives backed up in real time.
Yeah, that's the proper setup, dude. I feel like that philosophy is right. Now you have me thinking, do I have all of my stuff in three places?
Me
I'm
too.
thinking about that right now.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you just have to think about offsite, right? You have to think about like hard storage, right? Like you want to have hard storage in your space because like there's two different issues, like right, like and again for me, like having being someone that works on TV shows and commercials and ads, like I can't just call and be like, oh sorry, like computer failed. Like they're going to want a solution for their TV deadline, and that's not necessarily their problem, right? And you know so I think there's two issues, right? Like one is accessibility, right? Can you actually access your data in real time if you need it? That for me is my backup drive. That's in real time, right? The secondary is like if everything goes to shit, like can I replace everything that I have? And that's the cloud-based storage. And the cloud-based storage software that I for me I use a company called Backblaze, which I actually really love. They're super easy, and it just continuously backs up everything you have hooked into your mainframe. And in that case, if everything, like again, if my apartment burned down, right, like I would lose my computer and all my backup drives, but I could call Backblaze and they would like mail me an expedited copy of a hard drive of all my data.
What other catastrophes have you encountered recently, Natalise?
Well, knock on wood. I haven't recently, but my co-founder, his computer died just in the lab. Um, Luckily, it was all backed up, so it wasn't a huge deal. It was an inconvenience for him for sure. And but it's time, right? It's like um, it's time you can't get back. So yeah, I was thinking actually about, when this used to happen to me as a kid, when, you would write like, I mean, I would write like, these papers that and as a kid, like when you write your first essay or something, it's like a big deal. And I remember like pressing save and I thought it was like fine. And then it like was nowhere to be found. And I was like, oh, you don't know how many times I've had to do this. Like I had to rewrite like multi-page papers. And as a kid, it's super demoralizing, like not
Oh my
demoralizing, but it's like
God.
disappointing, like, oh
I remember those days. You had to put
God.
like a floppy drive into the computer and you had to literally save it because it didn't autosave. Horrible.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I have another story for you guys. So this was, I want to say this was late 2019. I had to do a big presentation. It was in front of like the news, live TV. And so the night before, I had this perfect presentation written up, accompanying graphics, and all of this stuff was done in real time online. And you would never imagine this, but I did all the work, and the local copy on my machine, on my desktop, on my laptop, showed that everything was gravy. So I closed the browser and I went to bed. And when I logged back in the morning, guess what? Nothing was fucking there.
No.
I was so terrified. So then I took out a piece of paper and a pen and I just wrote all this shit down, memorized it, and it was like ultimately it was fine because I think I came off a little bit more natural anyways versus like memorizing this perfect presentation that I had written. But can you imagine that?
Sounds like a bad dream that I've had. Like, I'm pretty sure I had a dream that I
But
was
this is real.
like,
And this speaks to like, you think it's on the cloud and it's all good, but I mean, you know, there's problems everywhere, right? There's problems like local backup, there's problems with cloud backup, there's problems with like, service providers that you use. But fortunately, I haven't had any catastrophic digital management issues recently, knock on wood. But I really think that we have to, I mean, as entrepreneurs, we have to prepare ourselves for the greater question. Are you healthy enough spiritually and mentally to keep moving at a particular pace when something catastrophic like this happens? Because I can tell you,
Yeah.
10 years ago, I was not. 10 years ago when that happened, it took me out for like literally 2 days. I was like depressed. I couldn't have conversations with people. It was just like, I was so attached to that stuff. Nowadays, I'm like, I just expect shit to go wrong.
totally. I mean, I think what you're really talking about is resilience, right? You
Yeah.
know, it's like when COVID happened, businesses, it's like, okay, think fast, like what are we gonna do? Okay, let's move forward.
Do you guys have
And
some like mental strategies around this topic? Like I don't know, like for Jess, today's example is very vivid to me because I've experienced the same thing. But now, at least, I'm wondering, like, you've had a few startup experiences in the past. Anything there that would relate to what we're talking about?
yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's like some people think you shouldn't think about worst case scenario, right? But actually, what has helped me is to think about worst case scenario and say, okay, let's pretend that that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Now what? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and this actually helps in like personal circumstances as well. And I actually learned it, I mean, it was actually in a therapy session that I had like way, way back when. And, I was actually talking about a relationship that I was in at that time. And, I was worried that the relationship was just going to go downhill and everything was going to go up in flames. And the therapist asked me, like, okay, well, let's say it does. Then what? What would you do? I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I guess I would be heartbroken for a little bit. And then I guess I would, start going back out in the world and I would be, and he's like, so you'd be okay. It wouldn't be fun, but you'd be okay. And I'm like, yeah, it'd be okay. And it was like, oh, okay. Well, then I shouldn't really worry about it.
I mean, but do you guys ever get, like, I have to admit today, like, I was proud of myself. Like, I kind of didn't necessarily skip a beat. Like, I talked out loud to myself and my dog thinks I'm nuts. Like, I was like, all right, crawling under the desk. All right, deep breaths. Like, the only time I almost melted down was trying to get my giant iMac into the box. I'm not good with spatial relations. So, like, trying to, like, origami it back into, like, the foam. Like, that was the one part where I had to, like, take a deep breath and, like, just breathe for a second and be like, this does fit in this box. Like, breathe, like, pull the foam squares out, put the foam squares back in. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this ever goes away. Maybe it's just me and I'm ridiculous. But like, I've learned not to give into it, but there is still like a part of me where this stuff goes down, and I'm like, oh, like free pass. Like I just kind of want to. There's like a little gremlin in me that just wants to like scream and kick on the floor and be like, no, no, I'm giving up today. And I don't feed that gremlin, and I like take a deep breath and then I like keep going. But I don't know. Is that do you guys not even experiencing that gremlin? Like I don't let it rule my life, but there was a moment when I was on this other Zoom and I'm transferring files over, and then my computer just melted. Where I was like, it's Friday. Like maybe this is a sign you should just like call it a day for like a millisecond, and then I like flipped into like fixing it mode. Like, do you guys still get that? Like, do you have that bratty moment where you're like, no, like, I don't want to do this?
I used to, but I want to say that that gremlin was eradicated, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. What I found to be true is like generally when something like that happens, even when this at no fault of mine, it usually has to do with me putting my life on speed mode. I don't know if it's a coincidence. I mean, because I would have never predicted a power surge. I remember specifically that week, I was going through life like so fast. I was trying to accomplish 10 projects a day and make sure that I finish everything. So nowadays, what I've really found to be helpful, and I think this speaks to like your reality is actually your perspective of reality, if that makes sense. So now that I find that when I feel that gremlin coming on, all that I would have to do is physically stop what I'm doing and slow things down. And once I do that, I get the quiet and the peace that I need to then move forward in a way that's conducive to whatever outcome that I want in that moment.
Natalise, what about you? What about your
Yeah, I
gremlin?
mean,
Do you have a gremlin
well,
left?
I was just gonna say though, like that power surge, Steve, that you described, it's almost like the universe telling you to like, dude, you gotta slow it down. And if you're not gonna do it, I'm gonna do it for you.
And that has happened to me as a recurring theme in my life. I kid you not.
Mm.
The other catastrophe I'll tell you guys about was a car accident that I was in. I was driving from my gym. Now, at least you remember Ice Chamber, right?
Mm-hmm. Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
Um, did you ever go to Ice Chamber number two, the bigger one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was driving from there to the Albany Fire Department because I was training the firefighters. And I remember like I was leaving the gym late. I was like grabbing a bunch of foam rollers, threw a bunch of medicine balls in the car, and everything was going fine except for that my cell phone had fell off my seat onto the floor. And the street that I was driving on is usually a pretty desolate street, and there's no cars there
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever. So I reached to pick up the phone, and then guess what? I hit a car that was double parked. And my car was like, I mean, fortunately, nothing happened to me.
Mm.
The guy wasn't even inside his car. Like he left his car running, double parked, and ran into to one of the retail spaces close by. But my car was completely destroyed. And I specifically remember that at the moment of impact, I specifically remember telling myself, dude, you're doing too much. Not only do I agree with what you're saying, Natalise, like the universe is actually very intelligent about when she wants to give you lessons, but she also does it in a way where it's like it's harsh enough to get your attention, but also not like devastating enough to necessarily like end it for you. Like I feel like the universe is kind in that way, right? Like in Jess's situation, yeah, her hard drive melted, but you know her house could have also caught on fire. Do you know what I mean?
So this is gonna sound like, well, I mean, it is sentimental, but like honestly, what makes me not freak about it, at least about data loss in this sense, is like when I was in college, it was like my parents got me a digital recorder, and it was like just to date me essentially, like in terms of how old I am. Like I had little tapes, like little mini recorder tapes for all the songs I was writing and working on, and they chipped in. And they all got me a digital recorder, and it was still at that kind of age where like I didn't know how to back it up onto a computer, so I just kept putting bits on this thing, and I had about a year's worth of songs that I'd written on this thing, and and I lost it. I called my mom frantic. I don't know what happened. I don't lose things very often. Like I'm not very forgetful. Like that's not, I have very many flaws, but that's not one of them, losing things. And I couldn't find it. And what actually put in perspective for me was my grandpa had called and left a message on my answering machine, and I recorded it on my recorder because I was in a phonetics class for French, and he was Parisian, he had a very thick French accent, and I recorded it, and he had passed away a month earlier, so I had his voice on that recording. So what put it in perspective for me was just this thing where like it was a year's worth of songs I'd written, but it was also his voice. and and the thing, you know what I mean, like I don't miss any of those songs more than I miss the sound of his voice, right? And I don't know, like it kind of like, even with this meltdown, like what happened now, like yes, it's all backed up, but like that moment for me, like, and we can't hold on to people forever, like I know that's a much deeper conversation than we get into on this podcast, but like, I think for me, having had that experience, like in the context of a year's worth of work, like his voice for the 10 seconds that was on it was the only thing I missed. Like I really felt like I missed. So I don't know. It's put data loss in somewhat of a perspective for me that I think, like, yeah, like a meltdown like today happens, and I do have that gremlin moment because it wasn't part of my day, like it wasn't psychologically part of what I had scheduled for my day to look like, to have to deal with the computer meltdown. So like I mean, you guys are just much more centered about it than I am. Like again, I didn't lose time, but there was a little kicking scream part of me that was like, no, not today. um and then I
Oh, for
handle what needed to
sure.
handle.
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake, like it's not like when things happen, I'm like, okay, breathe. Like, no. I
Right.
mean, of course there's like a freak out moment. I like, get super frustrated and really snappy and like good luck
Mm.
to anyone who's around me in that moment.
Yes, thank you. Right, right. Because
Right?
like, and
Yeah.
then you like the teeth go back in and logic
Yeah.
takes over. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's that moment where you're like,
Yeah, of
you're just
course.
reacting in a very humanistic way.
I mean, what you described just now, I mean, obviously, like, again, something, an emotional tie is just so much harder, right, than,
Yeah.
um, you know, kind of business loss. I actually, from a business perspective, something that my mom has sort of ingrained in me. So my mom, has invested in properties, and in some ways, any kind of investing is like gambling, right? It's like strategic gambling, and she. I remember as a kid, she had lost money on an apartment that she bought, and she was, you know I mean, as a kid, well, I don't know how much she was going to tell me anyway, but she said, yeah, I lost money on it, and it's hard. And I was like, oh, are you okay? And she was like, well, at the end of the day, it's just money, and I'm just going to make it back. I just have to. So that's always stuck with me. It's like, if there's ever a loss, it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to have to make it back. I mean, it's just like super matter of fact,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great life hack. It's a great life hack. You can always make it back, whether it's money or material goods, relationships. You can always make it back. Now the question is making it back always the right thing to do? We all have the propensity and the capacities to do that, should we choose to. I do know that when I was younger, this kind of stuff was really difficult for me. I was like really attached to like certain things, and when things didn't go right, it would really put me into like a spin. These days, I just gotta say, I feel like, I mean, I don't know. I say this in the most humble way. I feel like there's been a bunch of like evolution that's happened with me. I'm okay. Like I'm actually okay with losing a bunch of shit because I can make it back if I want to. But I'm also taking in the other message, which is like, well, do you want to make it back? Was this a good thing that this is gone?
I kind of feel like that every time I lose my cell phone, which happens once every like 10 years. It's not a very frequent thing, but like, like
Yeah.
I have this moment where I'm like even like Monday night, I'm gonna be without my main studio computer and then my laptop, my main laptop, because they need it to like clone it. And drop it off. They're gonna clone it overnight. And overnight for them is like drop it off at 4. And of course, my brain was like 4, But I also like have a iPad and I have a phone, And there's like something to be said. I don't know any. I don't know if you guys ever experienced this. I've been on business trips before where like all of my stuff's melted down, and I've kind of had this relief feeling for a bit where I'm just like, well, now you're just a human on planet Earth. Like this is like legitimately unavoidable that you have no connection to your stuff. Um, I don't know. There's like a minute for me usually like of relief, then followed by slight anxiety. But sometimes it's a relief. Yeah.
So, what do you guys think about strategies moving forward? We talked about catastrophes, how we immediately deal with it. But let's say that, okay, so Jess, for example, what are you going to do now? Are you actually going to try to recover and rebuild your computer, or are you going to say, forget it, I'm going to buy a new one? What is the greater message that you're receiving from this incident?
I mean, I think I can see where it's like a raptor like testing a net, right? Like it's like a rat. Not raptors are real things, but like let's just use a sci-fi fantasy slight, you know, Jurassic Park example, like those raptors tested where they were blank spots, right, in like the electric field, be able to get out. So I think that I'm looking and going, okay, like this wasn't an entire crisis; it was a partial crisis. So actually, nerdily enough, I'm going to spend this weekend with my laptop, double checking all my backup drives, and making sure I have my system working the way I want it to have. And I would prefer to have a local bootable backup drive. I don't want to have to give up my laptop. It would be nice to just had clonable bootable backups. So yeah, this weekend I'm going to get a little nerdy with some of my stuff. I have other projects, but I'm going to take a little pause this weekend and just kind of do a little digital cleanup and make sure that I have a workflow in terms of just like maintaining and backing up my stuff that doesn't feel cumbersome, but like leaves me in a place where I'm even better left off than I was this time around.
Well, there you have it, folks. Make sure you back up your stuff in 3 different locations per Jess Furman.
Or it doesn't exist.
Or it doesn't even exist.
It's an imaginary thing you think you own, but it doesn't exist.
I love that.
I'm double checking everything after this call.
Thanks for the anxiety, Jess. There goes my weekend.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, do it now, do it fast, do it quick, because it is beautiful outside, and I recommend everyone go out. With that being said, we're going to sign off. Steve Khuong, Jess Furman, Natalise, Unlikely Journey. See you guys next time, and of course, peace.